Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name's Amanda. So today's What's for Dinner video is all about the crock pot. So stay tuned. So guys, today's video is really special because it's in collaboration with my friend Megan from My Maine Kitchen. She is always cooking up something delicious. I'll have her channel as well as her video linked below. Make sure once you get done watching my video that you head over and check hers out. If you're coming over from her channel, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. I do all kinds of what's for dinners, recipe videos. It's all about the food here on my channel. So I would love it if you haven't already to hit that subscribe button and join my YouTube family. Go ahead and give me a like if you're excited for this video and see what kind of crock pot yummy dinners I have ready for you. But let's go ahead and get into the recipes. First up, we have a Sunday pot roast dinner. Now y'all, this is true comfort food. I absolutely love roast with, like, you know, mashed potatoes and gravy and all that stuff like that. And this is a crock pot recipe, so that helps and makes it a whole lot easier too. So in this bowl, I've got a can of cream and mushroom soup and some beef broth going in there. I've also added some Worcestershire sauce in there, as well as some dried minced onion. And we're also going to add in some garlic. You can use fresh if you like. I just happen to have the minced garlic on hand in the refrigerator, so I just use that. I'd like to use fresh garlic more, but I swear I just dread peeling it and messing with it every single time. So we're just going to mix this well. Now earlier I also added in, I forgot to mention, minced onion, onion powder, celery seed, and sugar a little bit in there mixed in with that minced onion. So that all went into that sauce part of it. Now I've got just some flour with some pepper mixed in, and we're just going to kind of get that all over that Ive round. So this is a large Ive round roast. This was actually bigger than what the recipe called for. The recipe called for 3 pounds. And if I remember, I think this was a little bigger than that. So it worked fine as long as it's going to fit in your crock pot. This gave plenty of gravy still, so it worked just fine. And we had plenty left over, so that was awesome. So now that we've got that all floured, we're going to put it in a hot skillet with some oil in there and just kind of get a sear on all these sides. Now I do have to say that since we're going to thicken the gravy later with cornstarch, I don't feel like the flour just made a huge, difference, and that, searing it. I do think it's always good to sear meat if you can, but if you really wanted to just make this kind of a dump and go kind of recipe, I think it would work just fine just to dump everything in the crock pot and not sear it first. And what I did is, since I did sear it, I went ahead and put a little bit of beef broth in the pan and scraped up all those brown bits. The recipe didn't say to do that, but there's flavor in that pan, so I didn't want to leave it there. So I'm also taking 2 of the little small cans of mushrooms. You could use fresh mushrooms. This is just what I had on hand, and putting those on top. And now we're just pouring that sauce mixture that we made earlier, and this is actually just going to cook for 8 hours on low. Now the recipe didn't give directions on high, so I can't guarantee you if you cooked it on high that it would turn out the same way, but of course if you cook it on high, you'd want to cook it for less than 8 hours. So here it is all done. We're basically going to just remove the roast and get those drippings and make a gravy with it. But I've got some potatoes started that I want to make mashed potatoes with, and then I'm also slicing up some squash and zucchini. And I'm going to actually use my griddle to cook these, because I used to love getting the squash and zucchini from, or it might have just been squash, I can't remember, from Ruby Tuesdays. And it would always have like this little caramelized outside. And it's really hard to cook a good amount of that, like in a, in a pan on the stove, because you just would have to do so many if you want them all to have that little, caramelization kind of on them. So I decided to use my griddle. I thought that would be a great way to do them all fairly quickly. And I just sprinkled some of that all-purpose seasoning on there and some oil and mixed it all together. And I'm just going to cook these for a few minutes on each side. I didn't time this, so basically just kind of check them and see when they're to your liking, and then turn them over. And then when they're done, you can just remove them all. And you can stick them in the oven and keep them warm if you want to while everything else is kind of cooking. So I've just got some half and half that I'm adding to the potatoes and some butter. We're just going to mash that up and get those, into mashed potatoes. I don't really have a recipe for it, but it's just kind of, I add a little bit, and then you can always add more. So just be careful that you don't add too much. But, you can kind of just get it to the consistency you like. And this is what I'm talking about here, where it gets almost like that caramelization. And I just feel like it adds a lot of flavor to it. So I love the way it turned out, and the griddle was so handy. So I don't know how I lived without a griddle, honestly, for so long, because it really is so handy. Now this is kind of the makings of our gravy here left in the crock pot, and we'll get started on that in just a minute. But we're going to go ahead and slice up. And I will say that I have never had a roast slice up like this. Like, that was so cool, because I've always wanted them to look like that. I know that may sound funny, but you know, like a lot of times if you go out to a restaurant or something, you get like a pot roast thing. It seems like they're more in slices. Now it did start, you know, especially towards the end there, fall apart, but I still got several nice little slices out of it. And I loved that. Like, you know, I guess it was the eye round. Maybe it holds together more, and the way it was cooked and everything, but I really enjoyed that. It made it present very nicely. So I've got those drippings here in the pan, and I've just thickened that with some cornstarch and milk that I mixed together. So that's ready. We've got all our veggies ready, and our mashed potatoes are all ready. And y'all, I'm such a kitchen nerd, but I love that little scooper. It's like the cafeterias would scoop out your, like, you know, perfectly round mound of potatoes. And so I got that off of Amazon. If y'all are kitchen nerds like me, I'll link it below for you too. But I just think it's so neat to make that perfect little mound of potatoes. And so we're just drizzling our gravy on top of, you know, our potatoes and our meat. And I've got one of those Hawaiian rolls back there too. This was true comfort food, y'all. Your family will think you spent the entire day in the kitchen, but really your crock pot did all the work for you. You just had to do like the gravy and all that stuff like that. And that came together pretty quickly. So it really was a fairly easy meal. Just a few steps to make everything, but I highly recommend it. I'll have that recipe link below. So next up, we have easy beef stroganoff. And y'all, this is so easy, I can't even tell you. And it really is so delicious. It got gone so fast in our house. So I've just added a couple cans of cream of mushroom soup. One of them is like really low sodium, and then one of them is kind of the healthy request, which is not as low sodium, but I kind of mixed them together. And I've got a couple pounds of beef in there. I've added a can of the little sliced mushrooms, and I've added about a tablespoon or so of the Lipton onion soup mix. It's too much sodium for me to put the whole packet in, but if y'all are not having to watch your sodium, definitely feel free to put the whole packet in. It'll be even more tastier. And I also added in some just extra minced onion, because I like a lot of the onion through there. And you literally just cook this for 4 to 6 hours on high, and then it's done. And it is so good. It's a dump and go recipe. You don't have to do any prep work at all. You literally just open cans and packages and throw it in there. And then we're just going to cook some of these like no yolk egg. Well, I guess they're kind of like egg noodles or whatever. And they go perfect to me with stroganoff. It's like my favorite thing to have with it. And then I also fixed some green beans to go with it. And that's super fast. You can be doing that as it finishes up. And here it is all plated up. And this was so delicious, so incredibly easy. It took no time. I cannot recommend this recipe enough, because it really is super simple and delicious. I'll have it linked below. So next up, we have Crockpot Carnitas. So I actually saw Kimberly from the Wads make this on her channel. I think she did it like in a freezer video, but I believe it was on her Instagram that she raved completely about it. She said it was so good. The company that she had over absolutely loved it. And I was like, okay, I've got to try this. I don't think I've ever even had carnitas, so I had never made them before or anything like that. But y'all, this was so good. And again, another crock pot slow cooker recipe, and I love those kinds of recipes. So I've got a couple of oranges juiced, and I'm going to use a couple of them to put actually in the crock pot too. Now the recipe called for 3 oranges. I didn't have 3, I just had 2, so I just used the 2, and that seemed to work fine. And then I've got an onion that I'm just dicing up that we're going to add to it. Now let me know in the comments below what your favorite crock pot recipe is, if you use the crock pot a lot, because I'm curious what all y'all like to make in the crock pot. But I just think it's such a handy way of getting food on the table for sure. Now I've got a jalapeno here, and I'm going to go ahead and just de-seed that and everything, and get kind of the, you know, anything that might be the hot part out of it, and chop that up really finely. Now the recipe mentions that you can use green pepper and jalapeno, or just one or the other. So you can do it however you like. I actually use both, but I had some frozen green pepper, so you'll see me add that in here in just a little bit. Now I've got a couple tablespoons of oil here, and I'm just adding my seasonings in there. I had some cumin, paprika, smoked paprika actually, salt, pepper, all that in there mixed together. Now the recipe, I read it wrong and it said 1 tablespoon of oil, but I used pork tenderloin instead of pork shoulder, and that's a lot leaner. So I think the 2 tablespoons of oil actually worked in my favor on here. But if you're using the pork shoulder, you may not need to use that much. But we're basically just going to rub that all over the pork. It did mention cutting it into chunks. I didn't really want to do that. I just left it whole and that worked completely fine. So I wouldn't worry about it if I were you either. And then I've added a couple of bay leaves in here. And then we're going to go ahead and add some garlic. Again, use fresh if you'd like to too. I just tend to use the minced a lot. I actually even added a little bit of powdered garlic just because I was a little low on the minced garlic. And I thought, well, I'll add a little extra in there because how can you have too much garlic, right? So garlic's great. So I've got the onions going in there, the jalapenos, the green peppers. And I just kind of eyeballed it on the green peppers since they were frozen, so I just guessed at how many to put in there. And now we're just pouring over our orange juice in here, and I'm going to go ahead and put those orange halves in there, and then we're going to cook that either on low for 8 hours or on high for 6 hours. I actually turned it on high for a little while and then turned it down to low, so I think I did actually a decent amount of time on high. And so you can kind of do whatever works for you, whatever time you need it done. And I was just checking it to make sure that it's going to kind of pull apart pretty easy. And it did. Also check the temperature with a kitchen thermometer. I always do that with my meat just to make sure it's done. And you can see it's falling apart as I'm taking it out of the crock pot too. And I wasn't really sure what to expect with this because of the orange juice being in there. I wasn't sure if that would make it kind of sweet or what. But this had so much flavor, y'all. It was really, really good. And I also don't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but I did add some coriander, just a little bit, ground coriander in there too. Because it mentioned you could do cilantro and I didn't have any, so I thought maybe coriander would be good to put in there. But like I said, so much flavor, and these pork tenderloins just really shredded apart really easily. And I like that it doesn't have as much fat on it as the pork shoulder, because I do feel like you get so much more fat in those fattier cuts like that. So this was perfect. It was really, really good. Now, once you get it shredded, the recipe mentioned about you could crisp it up in the pan, because, the thing about carnitas is like the crispy bits. I thought I had always seen people do it under a broiler instead, and so I decided to do it that way. And so you can do whatever works for you. You can do it in a pan or a broiler. I do think a broiler is just a little easier, just because you can, you just have to watch it because you can start burning it. But once I get this completely shredded, we're going to put it on a pan. I'm going to spray it a little bit with a little bit of olive oil, just to kind of make sure nothing sticks to the foil. And then, just put it under the broiler for a few minutes. Just keep a really close eye on it. You don't want it to burn. And once it's gotten to your liking, just go ahead and pull it back out and drizzle it with a little bit of those reserved juices from the crock pot. And that's going to make it extra tasty. And then you can use this however you like. It could be used for tacos, for burritos, for nachos, or whatever you'd like to do. We decided to make some white rice, and we also made some queso. It's just the kind that's like refrigerated and you just microwave it. And we served it with that, and then we ate chips with it and salsa. Now, I'm looking forward to having the leftovers and using it for, some nachos. And this would also freeze really well too, if you wanted to freeze it and kind of have some up. Because I actually think it was like about 6 pounds of pork tenderloin, which the recipe called for 6 pounds of pork shoulder. So that's the cheese queso I get from Walmart, and it's really good. I like it a lot. Now, it's not spicy at all. So if you're looking for something that's really mild, that's a good one. Because I don't do spice really well. I like it fine, but it just doesn't like me too well. So I stick to that one. But here it is. It's so delicious. I highly recommend this recipe. I'll have it linked below. Thank y'all so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out Meaghan's channel. I'll have it linked down below. I hope you each have a blessed day wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.